that's probably a little bit too detailed for everybody to see, but just to talk a bit about myself. So I'm the CEO of TSSG. We're an international research institute hosted by Waterford Institute of Technology. Previously, I was the founder of a company called FinTech Limited, which was a mobile cloud platform, and that's a company that we sold to Red Hat, which is a global software company headquartered in North Carolina. We sold that at the end of last year to them for $82 million. The significance of that actually is the first global software company in the southeast of Ireland, and we were just talking earlier on, since that company located in Waterford through that acquisition, we've had 3 companies from Atlanta, Georgia, move into Waterford in the last 6 months. We've also had a couple of companies located in Kilkenny as well. Just in terms of my own background, I also set up, originally when I came to TSSG, I set up its venturing arm, and we produced 14 startups to date, with 3 in the pipeline for the next 12 months. And then originally, just to talk a bit about my FinTech background, I originally worked in the USA when I started my career for a very successful company called Infinium, which was an enterprise or resource planning software company. And when I returned to Ireland, I worked for AIB, both for the retail banking group or the software group building retail banking systems, and for AIB Home Mortgages, building a new home mortgage system for them. And that was through an AIB and IBM startup called Resolution Technology. And then I went on and joined another FinTech organisation called Phoenix. And Phoenix typically did work for large insurance organisations. And I spent about a year in Edinburgh in Scotland working for Scottish Widows, and also worked for RSA here in Dublin and other companies. And in my role in TSSG, and particularly as we've been building up the organisation, we're now 140 people. I've been a little bit out of financial services for a while, and have recently come back in and started to look at the space and analyse the space with a view to doing startups in that space, and also supporting existing companies in Ireland through innovation projects. So I've kind of come back to it with kind of fresh eyes, and kind of what I want to talk a little bit about in my presentation is for somebody who has a bit of a background in FinTech to come back to it right now. It's a very interesting time to do so, because there's huge innovation going on across the world in financial services. And so what I'd like to talk about in the presentation is I'd like to talk about some of the drivers of innovation that we're seeing right now, but then also how that's in particular having an impact on financial services and how it will impact the financial services community, and then some other industries as well. So first of all, just a bit of background on TSSG itself. So I mentioned it's a research institute hosted by Waterford Institute of Technology. It was founded by Professor Willie Donnelly, and in 1997, so next year it'll be 20 years old. And Willie is now the president of Waterford Institute of Technology, and we're 140 staff, and we're 100% self-funded, which means that even though we're hosted by WIT, we don't receive any funding from WIT or any funding from the government. Everything, we're kind of like any other business. We need to bring in revenue through projects on a regular basis. Some of those projects we compete for public projects through, for example, Irish government public projects such as Science Foundation Ireland, and some of them would be European. But we also have a large body of work that we do directly for industry, and we also work extensively with Enterprise Ireland startup companies as well. So our expertise, we're a software-based research centre, so everything we do is about advancing software technologies and embedded in software. And in particular, the key areas we focus on are networks, mobile, and data mining and security. And that's at the core of our research. But of course, as we go and apply that into the field, that becomes quite diffuse, and we work in different industries with those capabilities. And so our focus as a research institute is on doing world-class science and innovation, but then turning this into economic impact in Ireland. And we do that by supporting IDA companies, supporting Indigenous companies, supporting startup companies, Enterprise Ireland clients, and by creating our own startups as well. So I guess that's, even though we're 100% self-funded, we're kind of like a business, but we're kind of mission-driven at the same time, which is our mission is to do great science and then have an impact in the community. And just in terms of specific impacts, there's lots of ways that research institutes are measured, including patents and publications and things like that. But I just want to highlight one of the measures, which is that over the last 3 years, we've completed over 110 direct projects for Irish companies or companies based in Ireland. And typically the majority of those would be for Indigenous companies and for startup companies, Enterprise Ireland clients in particular. And just touched on what we are, I suppose, just to highlight that TSSG itself. So starting with the kind of science or basic research, we then look to create technologies, we then look to create new innovations, and ultimately have them have an impact in the community as well through what's called commercialisation or entrepreneurship. So within our organisation then, what you'll find is that we have guys who've got PhDs in mathematics, and we'll have software professionals that will have come from industry, and we'll have students doing PhD programs, but we'll also have people that are experienced in product development, design of products, commercialization of products as well. So we've got across the spectrum different types of skills that allow us to do science, innovation and commercialization so we have an impact. Now I want to talk about some key technology trends. And I thought what I'd do is just start by showing something that would be out there that most people would have access to, which is, this is a map from Gartner, and this is the kind of Gartner map of key technology trends. And I like this because it actually shows some of the key things that are going on now. So starting at the top there, they're looking at certain trends such as computing everywhere, Internet of Things, and 3D printing. And what I'm highlighting there is that in terms of TSSG, in terms of what we look at, this kind of computing everywhere, which is kind of like increasingly enterprise software being delivered down to mobile devices. The Internet of Things is about extending that to physical wearables and sensors that are out in fields and sensors that are in industry. Those are two key areas that TSSG focuses on. And then this area of intelligence everywhere, let me roll back so you can see that. They then talk about three key trends in intelligence everywhere. So that's this idea of data, big data and analytics around big data, context-related systems. And the way you can think about context is when you're Googling something, it knows your location and it's got all of your searches, and it kind of, the way Google kind of figures out what you want to search for even before you're searching it. Well, embedding that in types of intelligence in everyday applications, and then smart machines. So these are things like self-driving cars and things like that. We don't focus on self-driving cars, that's not our space, but we do focus on big data and analytics around that big data. And we do focus on these context-rich systems as well. And I'll reference a couple of projects as we go along. And then finally, there's this new reality for IT, and I'll talk quite a bit about this as we go through the presentation, which is cloud computing really coming into the enterprise. And this is often referred to as private cloud. And this was something that actually Feed Henry was at the core of, which is mobile private cloud. Software-defined applications and infrastructure. So this is, I don't know if anybody's seen Mark Andreessen has been talking about software eats the world. What he's effectively saying is that software is at the core of more and more products and services. And so software-defined infrastructure is a core area for us. Web-scale IT, and then of course security. So we tend to focus in one way or another on all of those areas. And so I think we're in a good position to talk about where each of those key trends is going over the next 5 years. So I've got two slides that kind of just drill down a little bit on that and kind of talk a bit about what we do and then some of the work that we've done. And the way to look at this slide is the top bit focuses on the core, some of these core areas we focus on. The top set of logos then would be an example of some of the international or IDA clients that we work with. The middle tier would be Enterprise Ireland clients that we work with or have worked with. And then the bottom tier are startups that we've created. And so one of the core areas for us is the Internet of Things. And you might have seen some press coming out of TSSG and WIT at Better work in the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is effectively all of these different types of devices and sensors in the wild connected via the network. And a good example of that is we're doing extensive work in agri-IoT. So this is the concept of you can improve the yield and the costs of farming by putting sensors out, sensors on animals, sensors in the field, and then connecting that via the network to big data systems to optimize the agriculture process. So we have a number of projects that we're doing right now with Glanbia and Teagasc and a number of other organisations, really to advance the state of the art in terms of how farming is done, to improve more, to create more food and improve the processes by which it's developed by putting sensors out into the wild. So at the core of that is actually how these sensors connect to the network, how they share data. And then the other aspect of that is mobile, the types of platforms that enable that, the types of mobile experiences around that as well. So we've got two groups that really look at networks and IoT and mobile and IoT. And they tend to both do science, innovation and commercialization. And then historically, since the organisation was founded, we've always had a focus on communication services of one kind or another. And a good example of that is we do extensive work with Cisco at the moment in this space. But also, I'll just refer you to a company there called Alto Cloud, and that's on the right-hand side there. And Alto Cloud is a company formed by Dragon's Den, Barry O'Sullivan. I don't know if everybody watches Dragon's Den. And you'll know, if you watch Dragon's Den, you'll know Barry is the kind of Silicon Valley dragon. And Barry ran a billion-dollar business unit for Cisco in Silicon Valley, which is their communication services business unit. And when Barry wanted to leave Cisco and set up his own business, he came to us to do the research and development and build the technology behind his business. And if you get a chance, I don't have time here, but there's a very nice video testimonial that Barry has given us that's on our website. And what Barry says is that he came to us because we were experts in communication services. By the way, his product uses a technology called Web RTC, real-time comms. It effectively, if you've got a contact center or a call center or kind of a web presence that serves customers, it has the capability of making that, improving that very substantially. And so what Barry said is he came to us because we had the expertise in the technology, but we also knew how to take that technology and do research and do development and build out a product for him. And subsequent to that, Barry went on and raised a round of venture funding for the company, and I believe has raised a second round now as a result of that. And we have an ongoing relationship, R&D relationship with the company. And then some other areas we focus on. This area of services engineering is typically where we work with large international clients. So Lookout is what's called a unicorn, and I don't know if you're familiar with this term, unicorn. Basically, it's a term given to Silicon Valley billion-dollar companies. And Lookout is a billion-dollar Silicon Valley company in the area of mobile security. And we currently have a team of 15 people working for Lookout in Waterford that are doing R&D on mobile security products, technologies and products for them. And that company, when we started working with the company, they had an office in downtown San Francisco. They've now expanded to Toronto, Boston. We are effectively their European R&D centre in Ireland. I'll show you something on augmented and virtual reality at the end, so I'll leave that for the end. And then we've always had a strong focus on big data, AI and security. And I would say our focus, this is a much more applied group, so our focus on big data is really around these Internet of Things services. So we're not pushing the boundaries academically in that space. What we are doing is we're taking the academic state of the art and applying it in practice in real systems. And examples of the type of work we've done there would be, for example, with Tektronix, which is a Dallas-based company. We built them a brand new data platform. They basically put about 15 terabytes of data a day through that. And then we built things on top such as fraud detection and churn prevention. And the platform that we developed for them was trialled recently in a South African operator, a telecoms operator, and within the first week they found over $1 million worth of fraud that was happening on their network, and they were able to identify it and target it for to be addressed as a result of that. So using kind of big data techniques to look at, analyse and address fraud and some other areas would be core areas for us as well. Now, I want to bring us into some of the things. So if you look at IoT, it's happening right now, but the implications will go for many years into the future. I want to talk a little bit about what's happening right now, and particularly around innovation for FinTech. So we believe, particularly for systems for enterprises and for large organizations such as banks and insurance organizations, there's a challenge. And the challenge is that we're kind of moving from systems of record, where you have these transactional databases and you've got these stovepipe style services where systems were built to record things, to where systems are built to engage people. And that could be your workforce, or it could be your customers, or it could be your partners. And we believe mobile is at the center of that. And just as an example of that, a couple of key stats from Gartner here again, saying by 2017, 70% of mobile professionals will conduct work on personal, smart mobile devices using at least one form of application containment, i.e. What we traditionally think of as apps today. So effectively what this is saying is that more and more systems, enterprise systems, are being delivered out onto iPhones, tablets, Android devices, actually being embedded in things like vending machines. We'll see this particularly the case in terms of payments as well. But that, if you look at the bottom quote, what that really says is that companies are struggling to do so. And they're struggling to do so because of, and particularly existing large companies, are struggling to do so because of the heritage they have with existing systems. And just to kind of nail that point, that mobile is key for all of this. This is one of my favorite slides. It's actually from Kleiner Partners. There's a question for millennial smartphone behavior. My smartphone never leaves my side, night or day. 87% of people say it doesn't leave their side, night or day. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is reach for my smartphone. 80% of people. I think you can all identify with that. I spend more than 2 hours every day using my smartphone, 78% of people. And in the next 5 years, I believe everything will be done on mobile devices, 60% of people. So mobility is key to enterprise systems going forward. And we see that actually, and I have an example of a mobile bank at the very end of my presentation. And then this slide just shows where the penetration of mobile phones in 1995 versus 2014. 5.2 billion mobile phone users, and a very, very high percentage are smartphone, or what we would call iPhone devices or Android devices. And so that's part of that is driving this need for engagement in our applications. And so I had to use a Red Hat slide here because obviously Feed Henry was acquired by Red Hat. So, but this is part of what we were telling Red Hat in terms of the acquisition, and part of why they acquired us, which is that this emergence of bimodal or two-track IT. So your mode one is what we were talking about, these systems of record, versus mode two, where we need to move to, particularly to engage customers, these systems of engagement. So if you look at it, some of the key differences are mode one is transactional versus mode two is collaborative. Mode two is user-centric, it's open. The approach is agile, very rapid development of technologies and trial with users. It uses newer, lighter weight technologies. I'll talk about those in the next slide. The infrastructure is cloud-based. And the architecture for these is microservices. And I'll touch a little bit on microservices because I think particularly if you have a heritage of existing systems, microservices is one of the ways in which you can actually create that agility in your business. And the application, of course, is mobile. And it's extraordinary, even over the last couple of years, how much more of our of our engagement with systems has gone mobile. And so we say mobile is the catalyst for this move in terms of systems, but Node.js is the tool. And Node.js is a technology for building and integrating systems. And we have a substantial cluster of Node.js competency, particularly in the southeast, as it emerged from TSSG and went into Red Hat and went into other companies such as Nearform. We now, in Nearform, we were talking earlier on, we now have some Nearform employees building the core infrastructure for Node in Silicon Valley. And so the way to think about this is, if you've heard of things like LAMP stacks, which is Linux, MySQL, PHP, we're now moving to a Node stack where applications are built on this new agile technology and framework. And then I touched on microservices. So Node tends to be particularly effective when you want to create a microservices architecture. And the way to think about this is a somewhat complicated slide, but it's saying a couple of key things, particularly for banks or insurance organizations where you have a myriad of different systems. One of the core ways of developing and evolving your IT architecture such that you can be flexible and build these systems of engagement is leveraging microservices. And what that effectively means is taking each of your systems and exposing the capabilities of those systems through what's called an API or application program interface, and then linking that all together through technologies such as message buses and things like that. But ultimately what you're doing is you're taking the best of your systems and enabling them to be blended into mobile applications through the API and through the microservices architecture. And I would say in TSSG we have a particular expertise at doing that, and also some of our spin-out companies such as Nearform have that as well. So all of that is kind of driving a digital transformation where if you look, the last couple of years have been mobile first, and the reality of that is we're all using mobile applications these days. But how many of those are enterprise applications? How many of those are banking or insurance applications? And where we are using banking or insurance applications, how good are they compared to what I'm used to using on mobile? And that's one of the challenges as well. And then obviously into the near future, what we're looking at is other things coming in, such as wearables, such as Internet of Things, and I'll talk about that in the payments context. And really kind of enabling the business to go from these systems of record to engaging solutions and services mobile first for your clients and your customers. The other thing just to touch on as well is security is critical in all of this. And one of the other key trends, and you touch on it in Gartner, but you really can't go anywhere without thinking about cyber threats right now. And this is a critical issue for all organizations. And a couple of key things on this just to remember is that insider misuse is still a significant cause of breaches. And about 20% of breaches come directly from insiders, either accidentally or through malicious behavior. And in this move to mobile, there are also big challenges around that as well in terms of data harvesting off of mobile. So, and in terms of adware has substantially grown as well. So systems need to be put in place to manage this mobile delivery. Mobile device management is one of those systems to help that. And then we can't get away from human factors are critical in preventing and remediating attacks. And I was recently at another event and I was talking about some social engineering that was tried on our finance manager. It's a very common attack that was going on very recently over email, where the CFO sent an email by the CEO saying, oh, by the way, transfer X amount to this account. And if in certain cases, the CFO could potentially do that without doing a check on it. That was tried in our organisation, and thankfully the CFO rang me immediately and said, why are you asking me to transfer X amount to this account? And I was going, check the email address. That's not my email address you received that on. But these social engineering attacks are very, very common, and things that need to be guarded against and addressed as well. And I'll push on because we have a program, and it's a European Union program called a PAXO, that's all about collecting and gathering knowledge and disseminating knowledge around these around security issues for large institutions, and in terms of what are the threats, how do you address them, what are the frameworks in which they can be remediated, and also what are the opportunities for startups in this space to actually build new products for companies as well. And the website is here, it's ipaxo.eu, and it's a European Union program that we run in conjunction with a number of other institutions across Europe. Oh, I'll go back if you like, sorry, I'll go back to ipaxo there. The next slide, I'm just going to talk about software is easing the world. So if you think about it, we're talking about this move for enterprises to the mobile world, the need for existing businesses to have more agile architectures. And now we'll start to look at what does that mean. So Mark Andreessen runs arguably the most important venture capital organization in the world. It's based in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And he came out a number of years ago and said, software is basically eating the world or remaking industry. And I put this one in, or software defines everything. And what that really means is that software is getting to the core and disrupting existing processes, existing businesses. A classic example of this would be Uber. Is everybody familiar with Uber? So Uber, if you go anywhere in the US, not so much in Ireland, but if you go anywhere in the US at the moment, you don't try and hail a taxi. Maybe do in New York, I would guess, but outside of New York, you just get an Uber. And it's a fabulous service. You can get a car to your destination normally in 3 or 4 minutes. You see the car arriving, you see who's driving you, and there's an automatic payment as you exit the car. No, you don't have to exchange any cash. It's a phenomenal service and it has completely disrupted the transportation industry in the US. And in fact, they've gone from that onto other disruptions as well. So really what Mark Andreessen was talking about is really the potential of software solutions to remake industries in many ways. And we see that on the next slide, which is where we're looking at the types of industries that have been and will be disrupted by software technology over the coming years. And the way to look at this is that on the bottom axis you've got physical distribution of product versus internet distribution, and on the left axis you've got physical product versus digital product. And the argument here is if you're in the top right hand quadrant, so if you distribute your products via the internet and they're digital products, you will most likely be disrupted. And we see that certainly with entertainment services have been disrupted, telecom services have been disrupted, publishing has been, certain areas of tech themselves have been, and then financial services is in there as well as an industry that's prime for disruption. And that disruption is happening right now, in fact. And this is one of the really interesting things when I came back and I started to look at it. I was really unaware of just how much disruption is going on. That's not obvious yet. And so I want to talk a little bit about the impact on financial services. So this is from Venture Scanner, and it's talking about where is FinTech innovation happening in the world. And the darker red the colour is, the more innovation. And there's a couple of dots on this which you probably can't see, but I'll highlight those. A couple of cities in particular that are driving more innovation in FinTech than anywhere else. And they would be San Francisco, Silicon Valley, New York, London, and also to a lesser degree Berlin would be where disruption is occurring. And innovation is occurring, and not so much in Ireland. And that's probably one of the things I did want to highlight. There are certainly some companies in this space. There's certainly some companies being formed. But if you look at just the magnitude of what's happening outside of Ireland, Dublin or Ireland is not yet a centre for FinTech innovation, I would say. And that's one of the things that we, I think, should address in Ireland. Now, just to kind of map that out for you and give you, just to hopefully overwhelm you with some logos, here's a map of the startup sector. And it's just a high-level map that looks at different types of areas such as lending or personal finance or payments. And you can see And this is just a high level of over 1,000 companies tracked by Venture Scanner. Venture Scanner tracks venture-funded companies. And you can see there's a substantial number of startups in this space. Probably an easier way to see it is this slide here. You can see across the bottom the areas of the financial services system where startups are creating new products and services. And typically, an awful lot of these are mobile first, by the way. Lending is at the top, followed by payments, and we're probably all pretty familiar with what's going on in payments. Personal finance, equity, retail, small business, banking infrastructure, and so on. And tremendous innovation there. And if you look at funding into these companies over the last 5 years, you can see that the pace at which this innovation is occurring is gathering substantial momentum because you can see that the amount of money invested in these companies is going up and up and up. And last year was actually, this was referring to 2014 in this case, over 18.3 billion was invested in FinTech startups. And 50% of this is a 50% growth year on year as well. So this is a really substantial uptick in the investment going into these startup companies whose aim, some of them are actually providing products and services to existing banks and insurance organizations, but actually a very substantial proportion of them are trying to disrupt existing financial services companies. This is just a quick overview of top startups in 2014 in the UK, and you can see crowdfunding, banking for younger people, P2P money transfer, a lot of money transfer in 2014, and that's probably because if you look, there's been a lot of work done in the lending space already. And then if you look at the maturity, banking infrastructure has been a traditional area where, and that's on the left-hand side there, where companies target, but money transfer, personal finance, payments, lending, they're all now starting to develop a head of steam, and they're a little bit less mature, but that's because, the money is going into them now. So that's where the next wave of innovation is coming from. And then if you look at the venture firms investing, this is pretty much a who's who of venture firms in the world. Y Combinator, let's say I pick out Andreessen Horowitz there, Google, Index Ventures, Greylock. They're all investing in this space and putting huge sums of money. And that is resulting already in these FinTech unicorns, these companies, these startup FinTech companies that are valued over $1 billion. The first one is a Chinese company. It's a kind of started as a lending company about 4 or 5 years ago in China, providing personal lending, but now is actually got a whole range of different products and services it provides. Square is the other one. It's an Irish one run by Irish guys. Or sorry, Stripe is. Square is is a payment solution that plugs into your iPad or iPhone. But you can see all the way down. And Cabbage does, at the very bottom there, which is a $1 billion company, does small business lending, specifically targets early stage companies for lending. I won't take too much time on this. Insurance is pretty much the same story, by the way. So that's the map of insurance. And if you look at the areas where these new companies, the ones that all insurance companies be familiar with would be comparison sites or marketplaces. But now companies are starting up to compete in auto, health insurance, for example, life and home insurance, and so on and so on, and reinsurance as well at the bottom. So substantial innovation in that space. And then if you look at regulation that's coming in as well, if you look at the Payment Services Directive, which is new EU rules being adopted here in Ireland as well, very shortly third parties will have access to the bank accounts of your customers, and they'll be permitted to initiate payment orders on these accounts on behalf of account holders. And this does potentially put a distance between you and the account holder, and it could deprive you of valuable transaction data. And I was talking about APIs earlier on. The requirement on financial services organisations in Ireland is to provide an API to these third parties. So that in itself, effectively, these new entrants will have kind of an open door into your platforms to access your customers as a result of that legislation. Now, I wanted to talk about, no talk about financial services would in any way be complete without talking about Bitcoin and blockchain. So I'd like to show a quick video, if I could, just to talk a bit about that.
What if there's a technological advancement so powerful that it transforms the very basic pillars of our society? A technology which fundamentally influences the way that our economy, governance systems, and businesses function, and could change our conceptual understanding of trade, ownership, and trust. This technology already exists, and it's called cryptocurrency. People often think of Bitcoin as only virtual money or a transaction system. But if you look closer, you'll see that the monetary aspect is just the tip of the iceberg. That's because Bitcoin is a groundbreaking internet technology for which money is merely one of the possible applications. Money exists to facilitate trade. Through the centuries, trade has become incredibly complex. Everyone trades with everyone worldwide. Trade is recorded in bookkeeping, and this information is often isolated and closed to the public. For this reason, we use third parties and middlemen we trust to facilitate and approve our transactions. Think of governments, banks, accountants, notaries, and the paper money in your wallet. We call these trusted third parties. This brings us to the essence of Bitcoin. Bitcoin software enables a network of computers to maintain a collective bookkeeping via the internet. This bookkeeping is neither closed nor in control of one party. Rather, it is public and available in one digital ledger which is fully distributed across the network. We call this the blockchain. In the blockchain, all transactions are logged, including information on the time, date, participants, and amount of every single transaction. Each node in the network owns a full copy of the blockchain. On the basis of complicated, state-of-the-art mathematical principles, the transactions are verified by the so-called Bitcoin miners, who maintain the ledger. The mathematical principles also ensure that these nodes automatically and continuously agree about the current state of the ledger and every transaction in it. If anyone attempts to corrupt a transaction, the nodes will not arrive at a consensus, and hence will refuse to incorporate the transaction in the blockchain. So every transaction is public, and thousands of nodes unanimously agree that a transaction has occurred on date X at time Y. It's almost like there's a notary present at every transaction. This way, everyone has access to a shared single source of truth. This is why we can always trust the blockchain. The ledger doesn't care whether a Bitcoin represents a certain amount of euros or dollars, or anything else of value, or property for that matter. Users can decide for themselves what a unit of Bitcoin represents. A Bitcoin is divisible in 100 million units, and each unit is both individually identifiable and programmable. This means that users can assign properties to each unit. Users can program a unit to represent a eurocent, or a share in a company, a kilowatt-hour of energy, or a digital certificate of ownership. Because of this, Bitcoin is much more than simply money and payments. A Bitcoin can represent many kinds of property: 1,000 barrels of oil, award credits, or a vote during elections, for example. Moreover, Bitcoin allows us to make our currency smarter and to automize our cash and money flows. Imagine a healthcare allowance in dollars or euros that can only be used.
What I just wanted to get across was that, and some of you guys I'm sure are familiar with this space, that the blockchain that underlies, which is a technology that underlies Bitcoin, is itself a fundamentally disruptive internet technology. And there's lots and lots of companies now. If I can go back to this, hang on, see if I can kill this, see what happens. There's lots and lots of companies. There we go. There's also there's links to a couple of other videos there as well. Lots and lots of companies that have started up in this space that started doing things like exchanges and of course mining, but then went on from wallets to different types of financial services, and money transfer is a classic example of that. But if you look at where Bitcoin innovation is occurring, again, it's occurring in those centers. It's occurring, broadly speaking, in San Francisco Bay Area. London is a tremendous center for financial innovation, as I'm sure you're all familiar with. New York, and also to some degree Berlin as well. And there's one other thing I want to show. Sorry, I'll just go back on this slide. If you look at, there's substantial numbers of companies starting, there's substantial venture investing happening here. And what's really important here is I think that, regardless of what happens with Bitcoin, blockchain will stay with us, that technology will stay with us, and that technology will have an impact. And you already see substantial adoption of that technology by leading international financial institutions. And the adoption of that is picking up pace. This year in particular, there's been a huge number of announcements of existing financial institutions adopting this technology, for example, in terms of Santander, Citibank, for example, as well. And a lot of the projects right now are internal projects and are actually using a private version of the blockchain. But ultimately, these internal projects some of those will transition to be external projects as well. And so that's one of the key things I wanted to highlight, which is that this technology is being adopted. If you read the media, you'll see a lot of things about Bitcoin and blockchain. But the one thing I wanted to highlight is underneath all of those news stories is an adoption of the technology. And in fact, the financial services regulator in the UK has recently published guidelines for the rollout of that technology. So I suppose I just wanted to summarize on that, which is that coming back to it and looking at the industry afresh, I do see significant forces driving change. And there's some of those technology forces, such as cloud and mobile and big data and blockchain, but they're also in terms of just the sheer numbers and the sheer innovative nature of the companies leveraging those trends to create new types of products and services. And those products and services, whilst they aren't necessarily in the market today, will seek to enter Ireland in the future. And those companies themselves will become large and very valuable companies, at least some of them. And the second point really is that it's not that easy to see where all this innovation is occurring, because there's actually a huge array of it. You've actually got to go out and actually take a look for it and look at what are the threats to your existing business. And because a lot of these companies aren't based in Ireland right now, they're based in the UK or they're based in the US, it can be hard to see what's coming down the line, but there certainly is a lot. And then, of course, there's the significant challenges that all large businesses have, which are security, and security is becoming more and more of a threat every day, I think, both for governments and for large corporations, particularly organisations that have a heritage of systems, and any large bank in Ireland will have a myriad of different types of systems, and those myriad of systems will often be a drag in some ways on innovation because you have to take account of so much. And one of the ways to leverage that infrastructure is through, and not have it be a drag, is through microservices architectures. And then we've important new legislation coming down as well, which is being introduced, which is Payment Services Directive 2. And all of that coming together, I think, in summary, is a major threat for existing financial institutions in Ireland. And just as a motivating example on that, and I'm absolutely not saying this will be the case, but this is effectively just one kind of data point on what happened to the media industry. And this is the circulation of the Daily Telegraph, the Times and the Guardian from first quarter 2000 to third quarter 2013. And it's an index. So you can just see a massive drop off, effectively a halving of circulation. And that's because of the disruption from media businesses that were facilitated by the internet and by mobile technologies. So just as a concrete example of that, I wanted to show you a bank that's recently opened in Ireland called Number 26. And I should just ask, is anybody here from Number 26? Is everybody familiar with Number 26? So this is a mobile bank that has come in from Germany, that's opened over the last couple of weeks, And this was taken from their website yesterday. And you can see they've opened in a number of countries. They're originated from Germany. They've opened, I think, in 5 additional European markets. Ireland is one of those. And you see, actually, when you go to it from Ireland, you get a nice picture of the convention centre, so you can identify it as Irish. And basically, the rest of these shots are taken from their website. So a bank account that's just as mobile as you are. So it's a mobile-first bank. Banking everywhere. They do this always informed is about the fact that they're doing push notifications for pretty much all of your transactions, and you can configure the notifications you get and how you get them and when. Makes it easy to keep track of your spending. You can withdraw money anywhere through MasterCard, and they've over 600. They're integrating with different types of shops in Germany as well. And so they're positioning it as the first bank account that saves you time. So interestingly, you can set up a bank account via video identification in 8 minutes from your mobile device. There's no need to go into a branch. There's no need to hand over all of the existing documentation there to the branch. No doubt, I've not done this myself, so no doubt you do need some ID. So you'll need to present some ID and you'll need to do a video. But they advertise an 8-minute sign up, fast money transfer and fast cash anywhere. And then it's a full bank account, and they've no fees. No fees on the bank account at all. And that just opened a couple of weeks ago in Ireland. Mobile only, online through mobile sign up. And I meant to sign up for it last night just to see exactly what the sign up process was. But I'd probably recommend everybody go try it out and see what it's like, see if it matches the advertising. So I think that's just one example that is not even that obvious. Now, it was actually somebody from BOI told me about that. So I went and had a look. But I did a quick search. I didn't see a huge press release or anything like that about it. I actually saw some TechCrunch articles about them opening. And if you're in the tech business as I am, or in a research business, TechCrunch is something you read every day alongside Silicon Republic. And TechCrunch, which is a US and a UK-based blog, news site, announced that they were opening in Ireland in addition to those other European territories. Oh, and it's secure as well. So the question is, how do you respond to that? And I think there's a number of ways of responding to it, and they can be informed by an open innovation perspective. So this is a classic Henry Cheeseberg open innovation model, and it says a couple of things. That one of the ways to innovate is you create your own pipeline of innovations, and I think all financial services organizations have been working on that and need to continue working on their own pipeline of innovations, and need, where possible, to make it easier to innovate within your organization, or even easier than it is already. And compliance practitioners are an important support in that process to make sure that you're innovating whilst also compliant, and are important business partners to do that. But one of the other ways of looking at that is something that Bank of Ireland is doing, which is setting up incubators in Dublin and around the country to bring startups in and work directly with the bank. And then there's some other solutions to it as well, which I talk about here. And if you look at internationally what's going on, you'll see that in addition to financial services institutions creating their own innovations, they're also doing some other key things. So let's start with let's go around here and talk about, first of all, they're acquiring FinTech companies. They're also investing in them as well. And historically, I think the banks in Ireland have invested in startups. I know BOI, am I over time?
Yeah, you are.
I'll wrap up. This last FinTech slide, actually, I'll just go and show a video. So BOI has historically had a seed investment scheme that they've co-invested with Kernel Capital. I think that's a good idea, and I would be suggesting that Irish banks look to expand their corporate venturing. They look to invest in Irish businesses, but honestly, I think they should also look to London as well and invest in FinTech in London and look to bring some of that innovation back home. So setting up venture funds, startup programs, partnering with these FinTech organizations, both to launch new products into the market and also learn from what they're doing. And then doing spin-offs themselves. I think there's a great opportunity to spin out companies because there's a huge amount of intelligence and knowledge and capability within Irish financial services institutions. And I think there's a number of ways in which you as key members of those institutions can free that up. So that's it. Can I show a quick video?
Yeah. Yes.
I have one slide on VR because I want to introduce this. This is a fun thing that's going to happen next year, and then I have one quick video which shows some of the work we're doing. So next year is going to be the start of the virtual reality and augmented reality revolution. And VR is effectively, you see that kid there, he's wearing a headset. So VR completely encloses your environment and transports you to another world. And it's an artificial environment created with software, and it's presented to the user in such a way that they suspend belief. They believe they're somewhere else. In this particular case, this person believes that they're in the cockpit of the Apollo 11 rocket, which is blasting off to go to the moon. And some of the key players in this space would be Oculus kind of kick-started the industry over the last couple of years by launching what's called the Oculus Rift, and that's what that person is wearing there, the Oculus Rift. It's the headset that enables you to be transferred to this alternate world. Software is a key part, of course. It's software that actually is the environment in which you go into. That's a video from Microsoft. Microsoft have a fantastic product in this space, which is called HoloLens, which is an augmented reality product. And if you look at it, Facebook acquired Oculus, Microsoft has their own product, Google has some stuff they're doing with Cardboard, and they've got some great services in the cloud as well. And everybody believes they're working on a product also. Sony's also a key player in this space as well, as a Samsung and HTC. So you've got hundreds of billions going into this industry next year. It'll kick off in March with the launch of the Oculus Rift, and then HTC will launch in April. In fact, to some degree, it kicked off a couple of weeks ago with the launch of Samsung Galaxy Gear. And it will, VR and AR will have the same impact that mobile has had. So when you're watching some of this stuff next year, people will say, oh, VR is all about gaming. VR is not all about gaming, although that's an early application for it. VR and AR will affect every single business over the next 5 years. And so one of the questions for you to think about is, after I've sorted out, all of this competition, what's our AR and VR strategy, which is questions that you'll get asked next year when all of this launches. And to conclude, I'd just like to show you a video about what we're doing in this space, if that's okay. So, if I can just get my cursor, whoops. This is one of our spin-out companies, which we're still heavily involved in supporting. And this is some examples of work they've done in VR. So imagine you've got that headset on. How would you like me to proceed? This is with the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, and has been released on the
chest rate insertion site.
Has been released on the Gear VR, which is the thing that your mobile phone goes into. This is an e-learning platform, which is being released next year as well. This is, you feel like you're there, it feels real, and so it has a tremendous impact on the person when you're teleported to this other environment and you feel completely there. Finally, this is what everybody's going to hear about first. This is launching in March, and it's the Apollo 11 experience. It puts you into the cockpit of the rocket as it blasts off to the moon, and you actually get to walk on the moon.
The eyes of the world now look into space, to the moon,
and to the planets beyond.
That person in the headset there is General Charlie Duke. He was on Apollo 16, and when he came out of the headset, he turned around to the founder and said, "Dave, you got the moon exactly right." So he was quite emotional coming out of it.
The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not. And it is one of the great inventions of all time. Those who came before us made certain that this country rode the first waves of the Industrial Revolution, the first waves of modern invention, and the first wave of nuclear power. And this generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We need to be a part of it. We need to lead it. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind. And its opportunity for peaceful cooperation may never come again. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are willing to postpone, and one we intend to win.
So, and that's it. So, hopefully you get a chance to try that out over the next few months. I can tell you it's an absolutely unbelievable experience when you're in there. We've had people come out of it crying because it has such an impact on them. And it's hard, VR is one of these things, it's hard to talk about it. It's something that you have to go into and experience. And when you have that experience, we've had really significant impacts on people. And in fact, General Duke actually came out and there was a tear in his eye when he came out of there and said, you know, he hasn't been back to the moon since that time, and he was actually back there walking on the moon. So we've also had grown men coming out, breaking down, crying, who've always wanted to go into space and never get there. So it's a technology that has a tremendous impact. Its effect will be far beyond gaming, and that's not going to be that obvious next year, but it will be just as impactful, if not more so, than mobile. And particularly, I would say, augmented reality. And so Microsoft's product in that space is a really fantastic product and very important. And there's also a company called Magic Leap, which is about projecting directly into your eyes, which has already raised over $550 million from Google and Andreessen Kleiner, which is now raising, I think, about 700 million more before it's launched the product. And the other thing is that company, I'm sure Dave won't mind me telling you that company has not launched that product yet because the headsets don't launch until next year, has already got a term sheet or an offer of investment from a company in this space based in China without asking for it. And the company's come in and offered a substantial round of investment into the company based upon what they know will happen next year. And the whole world will go crazy on this next year. So hope you enjoy it, and hope you say that you saw something here first, or close to first anyway. Thank you.